Hello and welcome to the Unnamed Automotive Podcast. My name is Sami Assad, and with me, as always, is my good friend and fellow automotive journalist, Benjamin Hunting. Say hi to the people, Ben.
Greetings, human listeners.
Greetings to everyone. If this is the first time you're listening to our podcast, thank you for trying something new. I will reiterate, Ben and I are a pair of automotive journalists, but more important than that, we're extremely, ultimately, very good friends. Right, Ben?
Sammy, I went to the dentist today, and I went in for a root canal, which is already pretty grim. Mm-hmm. But even more grim is when they get halfway through the root canal and tell you, hey, buddy, we can't finish this root canal because things are way worse than we thought they were. So that's where I'm coming from today, because that was what my day was like. I had a failed root canal.
You didn't pass. Yeah, you
didn't pass
the vibes check.
No.
There's near me. There's when I moved to my new city here. There's actually a couple of buildings nearby that specialize, or clinics that specialize in sleep dentistry, which is a term that I'd never heard of.
I don't want a sleeping dentist inside my mouth. That seems like a really bad idea.
Shake you awake and be like, we couldn't do it.
No, they shake you awake and they're like, where's the doctor? Where's the dentist? And you're like, I don't know, I was asleep. And they're like, we can't find him anywhere. That'd be a terrifying prank.
Yeah, I'm terrified of the idea of a sleep dentist.
Anyways,
Sleep
dentists in the audience, write us in. I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, sleep dentistry.
Like, did you go to sleep school, or? I don't know.
For all those times, real school is too much.
Some people call it night school, but
no, sleep school. Ben, where can people find your latest work?
You can
that is mostly about the automotive industry, not about.
You can find my non-dentist writing at Motor Trend, at Haggerty, and at Inside Hook.
And you can find my non-sleep writing over at autotrader.ca, driving.ca, and Capital One's Auto Navigator.
I want to say, sorry, one other thing. I had some people reach out to, some listeners and some friends reach out to me on social media this week asking me about the gas tank in my Z, because I just put out a feature on Haggerty. If you go over there, www.haggerty.com, and there's...
Are you asking me? It sounded like a question.
There's a feature where I needed a gas tank for my Z, which I've talked about previously on the show, and I found it in the Netherlands, of all places. The only place in the entire world that makes a factory correct stock fitting fuel tank for the S30 generation, and I mean every year of the S30 generation Z, is a company called S30 World in the Netherlands. So I talked to the owner, I interviewed him, and found out why this was the case. And anyway, that story went up a couple days ago, or by the time you hear this, maybe 4 days ago, on Haggerty. So check that out if you're curious about my gas tank journey, because there's some other like sketchier and way more expensive options out there that I neglected, or not neglected, but I elected not to pursue.
Gotcha. Ben, this week we've got a very exciting vehicle, one that I've never even gotten close to touching or experiencing. I shouldn't say touching. I haven't gotten close to experiencing, one that you've driven and one that I'm really eager to hear your thoughts. Hit me with it. This is an exotic, is what people would call it, right?
Yeah, it's the 2025 Aston Martin DBX 707. And that's the 697 horsepower version of the regular Aston Martin DBX, which I drove, I'm not sure when, I want to say 5 years ago. I'm going to look it up because we talked about it on the podcast. Yeah. So I'll look it up now. But the 707 is for all those people who thought that it was 2021. So it was actually quite a long time ago.
Yeah.
That was the week that we had the RS6 and the DBX on the same show. So two very different ways of going fast with your entire family.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, Aston Martin was like, you know what? The twin turbo V8 in the DBX isn't quite enough. We're going to turn up the wick. We're going to make it even crazier. We're going to add carbon ceramic brakes. We're going to do a whole bunch of suspension stuff, some tricky things underneath the chassis. And we're going to sell it for, I think, $300,000 in the US. 256 is the starting MSRP. In Canada, it's like 304. But the options add up quickly. I think the version that I drove was 399 Canadian.
Okay.
And I'm looking at a version in the US. It looks like it can go up to about 290. So it's tough to tell with these cars. it's hard to know what base price actually means, because I think once you start spending $300,000 on a vehicle, things get pretty bespoke pretty quickly, if you know what I mean.
Exactly. So was this a very bespoke vehicle? Did it feel like it was catered to a specific driver or owner that is not you? Because I've driven so many of these like other luxury, like non-performance oriented luxury cars, like Rolls Royces, that they're designed in a way really like thoroughly to appeal to a very specific owner or type of owner.
Yeah,
that makes it feel really different, really special. Makes you kind of as a journalist who might not ever get into the mindset of owning something like that. It gets you into that, and I thought that was cool.
So one more note: you can only buy a 707 this year. The regular DBX has been dropped from the lineup. So I don't know if that's because everyone was just ordering a 707, which again is something that happens when you get to the world of exotic cars. Everyone wants to have the best one. And if the best one is not a production limited model, that's typically what tends to happen. There's also something with the Aston Martin DBX. You can get this thing called the Q customization service. So it's kind of like BMW individual, or I can't remember what's Porsche's version called. They have a similar type of thing.
Select, maybe?
It could be. And there's the Rolls Royce is just, they're all bespoke pretty much. This is not really a standard configuration. So the version of the car that I drove, to answer your question, Sammy, it does feel special as soon as you get inside of it. There's things about the DBX that you don't really get from driving other luxury SUVs. So, there's, I guess, in comparison, the closest non-exotic to this vehicle would probably be the Porsche Cayenne Turbo.
Okay.
Well, I would think that's, performance-wise, maybe, I don't know so much image-wise, because I'm not sure the average person can tell different Cayennes apart from each other.
Maybe the coupe version, the Cayenne coupe, maybe?
Maybe. I don't know. But the difference...
Because I think people can look at that and be like, oh, that looks wild.
But when you get inside a Cayenne, or when you get inside an X7 or or an AMG version of a Mercedes-Benz SUV, you're still inside an interior that was designed, or not even an interior, but a cabin that was designed primarily to serve the widest stretch of buyers.
Yeah.
In the sense that the interior materials might be nicer in the Porsche Cayenne Turbo, but the size of the interior, the configuration of the cockpit, the way the seats are arranged, all of that is the same as the base model. Like the hard points are all the same. For something like the DBX, the hard points, there's only one version of this vehicle, really. It's the best version of this vehicle. They don't have an entry level version, especially now that you can only get a 707, right?
Yeah.
So when you get into the vehicle, the first
that should offer a lot of a very unique opportunity to really emphasize how special this car is.
Yeah, and the way you notice it is immediately the car feels much tighter isn't exactly the right word, but the interior wraps around the driver and passengers more so than you would find in a more mainstream vehicle.
Like a cockpit kind of thing? Like
it does have car. Like a cockpit feel, but not in the sense that the dashboard is wrapping around you. Just the entire cabin itself feels more centric to the driver.
Okay.
And that's not to say there's not space in the vehicle. I'm not saying it's shrunken, because there's still 54 cubic feet of cargo space in the back. I actually ended up using it a couple of times. I could carry, as long as I took out the cargo cover, you could carry a pretty decent amount of stuff. And you could fold the seats down and get more. But from a pure passenger perspective, just from riding in it, it does feel like an experience in the sense that you feel like every aspect of the cockpit has been carefully considered. It doesn't feel as mass-produced as maybe some of its rivals would, if that makes sense.
That's perfect. I mean, that's what you're going for, really. And this is something that might compete with something like a Lamborghini Urus, or Q8. Do they make an RS version of that? Isn't there an RS version of that?
There's something like that, yeah.
Which are essentially, platform shared cars, those two vehicles I just mentioned.
That's the thing. So that's, again, different from the Aston Martin.
So one of the things then that I'm always concerned about when it comes to Aston Martin is that their powertrain sometimes they change origins sometimes, as in they might come from an AMG power plant or they might not. Well, what's the case here?
Aston Martin, I don't think, builds any engines anymore outside of its 12-cylinder.
Okay. Is this running on a 12 cylinder?
No, it's a hotter version of the AMG motor that was found inside the standard DBX. I also just found out that in China, there's a straight six version of the engine from AMG that is inside the DBX. So that's pretty interesting.
What does that? How does that make you feel?
I think it's neat. I mean, why not? I don't quite get it, but I mean, if you're going to,
is that considered a downgrade? Yes.
Yeah, for sure. So it's weird. Like
it's still AMG though.
But why offer that market, something that's less prestigious than what you'd find in other markets?
Actually, I want to talk about this because I went to AMG's factory where, the whole ethos of AMG is like they're handmade engines, one man, one machine, or one person, one machine. And when we were there, they had a whole floor dedicated to non-Mercedes products, basically the Pagani motor.
Okay.
And I think these Aston engines as well. But as far as I understand, the six-cylinder AMG motors are not one man, one machine and signed by somebody.
Well, how many machines are making them now?
I don't know. I think they're part of the mass-produced engines. Which is not to be said about the four cylinders, which I think were also one man, one machine ethos, whatever.
So getting back to the cabin of the vehicle. Lots of details, interesting speaker placement. Everything looks very nice. I had a tan leather inside. Mm-hmm. Absolutely no complaints about it. The seats were a little bit pinchy for my back, which is getting larger with every passing year. Other than that, though, I can't really complain about. It is a nice interior. It is full stop. Feels like a luxury automobile, a very special luxury automobile. Also interesting on the center console, instead of relying entirely on a touchscreen, and this is good that Aston Martin did this because the touchscreen is, I think, the weakest part of the vehicle for a couple of reasons that I'll get to. But there are these nice weighted dials. Remember how Volvo used to have that weird kind of textured roller dial on the center console, and
we used to call it like a log, like a
little log. So it was for drive modes, right?
Yeah.
So Aston Martin doesn't have a log, but it has 4 different rollers that are textured in a different way. Instead of waves, it's like little bumps, and they're for controlling the temperature inside the vehicle. And one of them is for volume, and there's another one that I can't remember exactly what it did, but they're arranged in the center. The shifter is it sticks up. It's kind of like a dual tab thing that's centered in the console, and you push and pull it for, forward, reverse, all of that stuff.
Okay.
And there's the ignition button is also in the center, and the least obvious part of the controls are around the ignition button. There's a dial that you twist for drive modes. It's not really labeled, so you just kind of have to know that that's how it works. And it's a little alarming to like twist the ignition button to change drive modes. It works fine. There's no problems with it. But
that's cool. I like that though. That's neat. I mean, isn't like the action of, we have all these push button starts now. So like the action of like twisting something to turn on or off is
you push it to start it on and off. You twist it to change drive modes.
Yeah, I love that. That's perfect. I think more cars should do that. I actually think more cars should incorporate controls that you'll only use once or twice per driving session.
So speaking of controls that you're only going to use once or twice, I tried to find the rear wiper for this vehicle because it snowed while I had the DBX. I drove this through a remarkable slate of conditions, which I'll get to. There is no rear wiper. This didn't really seem...
it's one of these things?
Yeah, but it wasn't really a problem.
What do you mean it wasn't a problem? Where did the snow go?
The window screen did not really get dirty. The snow goes on the ground when you wipe it off by hand, Sammy. I think everyone knows this.
By hand, yeah.
Or you have Jeeves do that for you. I don't know.
So while you're driving, it stopped snowing?
No, while I was driving, it didn't really accumulate on the back. There's a really aggressive ducktail on the back of the DBX 707 that's not on the regular DBX.
Is it heated, the windshield?
I don't know. Oh, heated? Well, it has defrosters, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about the back window. You realize that, right?
Yes, the back window.
Because you said windshield, and I'm like...
Sorry, rear windshield.
The controls for everything else, though, like that's a stock. It's pretty normal for the front window. There is a Mercedes borrowed infotainment screen that uses Aston Martin graphics and whatnot. And the way it's angled in the screen makes it very, 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 very difficult to use in daytime. I
Okay.
struggled to make it brighter. I could not figure it out. I went into the owner's manual, which is a nice hardbound volume befitting of the vehicle's status in life. Could not find information there. It works fine at night, but during the day it's very washed out. When I was using Android Auto, it worked okay, but when I went back to use, like, say, a vehicle setup, trying to change the volume, trying to change the audio settings, trying to change the vehicle safety settings, you can barely see the screen. That was a problem. Also, there's really not a lot of customization that can be done through the infotainment system. I was really surprised by that, because usually you get these luxury cars that have a million different options. And we've actually complained about it with BMWs and their performance sections, the performance driving profiles in the M branded cars. It can get really complicated. Well, with Aston Martin, it's super simple. There's like regular, sport, and sport plus, and you can make the exhaust louder if you want. You can just add aggressive suspension settings if you want. You can raise and lower the ride height if you want, or you can put it all in. You can trust it all to one of those drive modes. But that's pretty much it. I tried to use the voice commands to get me into different configurations, and it didn't really work very well. And I also found the gauge cluster to be very simple. Again, it's all functional, but quite simple in a way I didn't expect from a high-end car like this. And the washout was incredible. Like, really, if there's something I'm doing wrong, I would love to hear it. Any Aston Martin owners out there, or if Aston Martin is listening to me, I just couldn't figure it out. I could still use it. It was just not as easy to use as I wanted it to be.
Interesting. How do you feel about that? Like, I mean, do you think that a vehicle like that needs intense customization like BMWs offer? And let's be clear, I've complained about it because I always feel like I'm dialing a car a certain way that that is is not helpful, right? Like, will not make an impact, or will ruin the driving experience, or makes me think that however BMW or whatever automaker designed this vehicle was not whatever combination of settings I picked, you know?
I don't think that the regular DBX would need that. I think if you have something like the 707, there's maybe more of an expectation of that. I don't think it detracted from my experience with the vehicle. I was just surprised by it. And you know, sometimes too, luxury means not having to make decisions. So that could be a part of it for sure.
I think I agree with that sometimes.
So in terms of driving it, the suspension certainly feels more aggressive than the regular DBX. On the roads leading up to my home, I have a couple of options. If I stay on the asphalt, it's bumpy, but it's not that bad. At this point, most of the frost heaves have figured themselves out. And I would call the car's comfortable pretty much at all times. I took it on the dirt road, the gravel road that leads kind of into the countryside part of where I live. And right now, the thaw has not been nearly as kind to any unpaved areas. I had a lot of potholes, a lot of just washboard, and some standing water. And the car felt fine. I mean, it was controllable. I didn't have any issues. I tried to take it slow because it was riding on 23-inch wheels.
Yeah.
So you don't want to hit a pothole hard with a wheel like that. It was on winter tires. And when I did have snow on these same roads, I found that the vehicle handled quite well. These carbon ceramic brakes do not like the cold. They are noticeably less performing until you heat them up. And when it's very cold outside, it takes a little while longer to get them up to temperature. So that's something to keep in mind if you're going to be taking one of these up into the mountains or something like that. Give yourself a little bit extra distance in the first 5 to 10 minutes of your drive. But it's quiet inside if you want it to be. It's hellaciously loud if you don't. You can open up the exhaust pipes to a cacophonous level. And I treated my father. My father came to visit, and we went to Record Store Day. We took a drive about an hour to the closest decent record store, and I had him experience the race start feature with this vehicle, which sends the DBX to 60 miles an hour in 3.1 seconds, which that's extremely fast. The weight of this vehicle, I mean, this thing is not light. I'm trying to pick it up. It's 5,000 pounds. So launching that much mass that much quickly, it's one of the vehicles where you can feel the skin on your face kind of melting back towards your ears in that first second and a half of launch. So it's pretty impressive to experience. My dad asked me how it compared to like an electric car.
Yeah,
in terms
great
of
question.
launch.
I mean, now all these electric cars have so much launchability, right?
My opinion would be, I think the drama is much higher in the 707 because you have the volume and you have the gear shifts, which is something you don't get in most electric cars. The other thing too is there are some electrics that can launch very quickly. Some of them can't do it until the battery is up to a certain temperature. Some of them can't do it unless they go into a special cheetah mode, and we all know which company that is. So, you know, being able to do it on command in the Aston Martin, again, the engine has to be warm. And there were a couple of instances where I tried to do it and it said launch mode not, race start not available. And you'll notice that nomenclature is very Mercedes AMG. I think it was mostly temperature related, but also it depends on the configuration of the electronic driver's aids that you have set up. I don't think you can use race start if everything's turned off, like lane keeping and all that stuff. So just something to keep in mind if you're trying to impress people. But you don't even need race start for it to feel extremely fast in pretty much every situation. It's very easy to hit 100 miles an hour and not notice it. And in fact, this is one of the few SUVs I've driven where I would look down and I was driving 30 kilometers an hour faster than I thought I was, because it's that calm to be driving it at that speed.
Is that out of the ordinary for a high-end luxury car? I always find myself feeling the same way about like certain BMWs or Mercedes. Is that like sometimes their gearing is just so good and their powertrains are so smooth that I'm always like, oh man, I'm going a little bit faster than I thought I was.
I know you like to talk about gearing.
Sure.
But no, I think that for the Aston Martin, it can disconnect you from the outside world in a way that other luxury cars don't. I think that that's a coddling aspect when you're just driving it normally that sets it apart from other high-end SUVs, in my opinion. It's good at concealing its mass. It's good at concealing the rate of speed that you're traveling. In sporty driving, I mean, the question always with these kinds of vehicles is, why do you have this car? And I think the answer for the 707 is because you have 12 other cars and this is just one more car that you have. I think that's probably the 707 buyer.
I don't know about 12, but many other cars. But you needed something that was a little bit more practical.
No, I don't even think it's that. I don't even know if it's a practicality question, because this vehicle is no more practical than, say, a luxury sedan or an X5, right? Like, it's the same number of seats. The performance that comes with it is useless on regular roads, and you're never going to take this to a track. You're just not going to do it. It's not going to happen. You don't see these kinds of vehicles being used on the weekend on road courses. Then the question becomes, okay, so do you buy this because you want to go off-roading with it? Which it can certainly do, and it does have decent ground clearance and all sorts of tricky electronic driver's aids. But are you going to take a $300,000 vehicle into a mud pit? Are you going to take it to get scratched by branches? I'm not sure. So I really feel like these kinds of vehicles, they're trophies, and that's fine. But it's a trophy aimed at a very specific person. I don't think it's the same customer as the Urus. I feel like the Urus and Lamborghini are aimed at a very specific slice of the public. And I think Aston Martin is aimed at maybe even the polar opposite of that slice. Mm-hmm. If you know what I mean. Like this
in the same price range,
Yeah, this car doesn't feel as ostentatious. Even though mine was painted a beautiful bright green color, it doesn't feel as ostentatious as a Lamborghini. And I think that that's appealing to some people. And I guess the people who are buying this, they they want the most expensive, their perception of the best in a specific class. Also, it's something you're not going to see other people driving. These are very uncommon cars. And to some people, that's also important. And that's something that it has as an advantage over Porsche or Lamborghini.
Interesting. So, I mean, the obvious question is, it's not worth it. I mean, is it worth it? No.
Well, I think that at this price point, you're divorced from value. I don't think value enters into the equation. This is something you buy because you can. This isn't something you save up for. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I don't know if anyone's fantasizing about owning one of these one day. I don't know if it's that kind of aspirational. I think it's more the kind of like, I can afford this vehicle. These are the options out there. I'm picking the Aston Martin because A, it's different. B, none of my friends have an Aston Martin. C, I like the styling, which isn't as aggressive as, say, an Urus. And maybe I have a muddy road going to my cottage and I don't want to take my S-Class there. Maybe it's a confluence of factors like that. It's hard to say.
Okay. Perfect. That answers the question I was trying to get.
I do think it's a very sweet powertrain. It has a 9-speed automatic, I believe. and it's I want to say the transmission in the 707. It's an automatic, but it doesn't have a torque converter. I think it's some type of wet clutch setup, and I'm going to double check that now. And yeah, a wet clutch pack. You notice it in those situations where maybe you're coasting towards a stop and you don't do a full stop and you try to take off again. And there's maybe a slight hesitation every once in a while as the transmission tries to figure out what you're going to do. But then when you're driving it quickly, the shifts are instantaneous. And when you're just coasting around at low speeds without like approaching the stop point, it's transparent. So that's a nice feature of it.
Okay. Anything else you want to tell me about the DBX 707?
I think it's a special vehicle. I think it does stand up as a special option in the luxury segment. I think it's more than just a high price point. Again, if you're shopping for a vehicle like this, you're going to buy what you like. It's not, I don't know necessarily that what I say is going to make a difference. And I don't know as if you should buy it. I don't know if there's an objective reason to buy this vehicle. I think this is an emotional purchase that is not going to let you down in terms of experience. I do think you need to temper your expectations in terms of like whether you need 700 horsepower on the street. That's really that's not really what you're paying for with a vehicle this expensive and this exclusive, but there are other ways to get that much horsepower if that's what's important to you. And even then, like most of those ways, you're also not going to be able to tap into them.
I really appreciate you saying that because I feel like other high-end luxury cars miss the mark because there's so many ways you can get performance on the road and not necessarily getting it in an SUV is the best way to deal with it. But the Aston Martin has a unique aspect of it, which is that it is rare, I suppose. It will turn heads. People will hear it. And those things all add up to a far more special experience, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. The car I drove was also a luxury-oriented SUV, but nothing nearly as high-end. I mean, let's be clear. I drove the 2025 Acura MDX, which is a 3-row crossover or SUV. The top of the line SUV at Acura. I'll remind you that I drove the RDX not too long ago and found it to be pretty good, but just not competitive. And when I look at the MDX, I see a car that has all of Acura's high points and very few of their low points. But again, it feels like Acura has not looked at the competition in a long time and has not realized what other automakers offer that make their vehicles a little bit more special.
So is this a case, again, of Acura selling MDXs to past MDX buyers?
To past MDX buyers? Yeah, I think that's fair. I think one of the weirdest things I will say about the MDX is something that is a compliment but might not come that way. Let me double check here. To me, the platform, from what I believe, might be very closely related to a Honda platform, and it does not feel that way. The powertrain is also just a 3.5-liter V6. Let me double check that platform bit.
Is that the same V6 that we find in vehicles like the Pilot or the what's the pickup truck called? Why can't I think of that right now?
Ridgeline.
The Ridgeline.
Yeah.
The one that every like 4 years they say it's completely new, but it's always like the same displacement and the same horsepower, or like 5 more horsepower.
Yeah, this is not like, I mean, it's the same class of vehicle as the these other 3.5s, and it apparently just makes 290 horsepower in this application.
It has to have been stuck at 290 for a decade.
Yeah, it feels like it, yeah. But it's paired to a 10-speed automatic that, oh my god, it is brilliant how much better this powertrain feels compared to the new Pilot that I drove not that long ago, and the one that you've driven recently as well, which those cars can sometimes feel so lethargic and lumbering, whereas this Acura feels so much more like responsive, intuitive, and I really appreciated that because I was just jumping into this car thinking, oh, here we go. It's that 3.5, it's that 10-speed, and I'm going to get something that's really floaty, non-responsive, and just boring to drive. And I just didn't get that from the get-go. So I will say the first impression from the MDX is super strong, and I was just blown away by that. Other things that you need to know this year, the automaker has really lightly changed the exterior design. There's a new grille. I love Acura's attempt to always trying to differentiate itself through its grille and failing miserably almost every time. Their best grille redesign was with the beak because it was different, and or the shield. Beak or shield? I don't know which one to call it.
I think it's both. Beak, shield. Go with that.
Basically, they put this massive plating on top of the grill that looked wild. People were like, "This is ridiculous looking and ugly." But the more I think back on that, I'm like, they actually did the job of differentiating their vehicles with their grill design. And now they just keep rolling it back, and they're like, "Oh, it's got a mesh now." And I'm like, "Everyone's got a mesh. What are we doing here?" And then they've got new wheel design, which okay, great wheel design, right? It's nothing that's going to make you go, "Oh my God, those wheels!" And those are the elements that you're going to point out, especially for the 2025 model year vehicle. Inside, there are somewhat more important changes. There's a large infotainment system. I believe the old model had a trackpad similar to the one I used in the RDX. That's gone now. And instead, there's a big old. I gotta get the size on this. 12.3 inch digital, 12.3 inch touchscreen and a 12.3 inch digital gauge cluster. It's very nice. I found that reaching the far right hand side, or basically the passenger side end of the touchscreen, to be a bit of a stretch.
Do they give you like a little, like a little
pointer? A
pointer that has a hand on the end. And
I really wish they did.
Like a human flesh equivalent on the hand. Like it feels kind of like, like you get those little gummy hands in a capsule, like you put in a quarter, and you get like a toy, like it's like an eraser in the shape of a human hand. This is what I'm picturing.
Yeah, that's what we need more of. Really, I need like a special finger extender for my touch screen. Great.
I bet you could get one from Porsche Select or whatever it was that you mentioned.
Another thing is, my understanding is they have removed their premium. They used to have a premium audio system called ELS.
Yeah, that was their big thing. That was their Meridian.
I believe that's been replaced now by Bang & Olufsen.
Okay. Hard times for ELS.
Yeah, there's two versions of a Bang & Olufsen sound system. The model I had only 19 speakers, while a range topping model has 31.
Wait, how much cargo space do you lose when they add 10 more speakers?
It's 12 more speakers, thank you.
Wow, sorry.
It's a ton of space. I mean, that's a ton of speakers. Like, that's... Did you... Like, okay, so we like to watch...
Let's say you're listening to some dubstep and you blow every speaker and you go into Acura and they're like, "I'm sorry, but replacing all 31 speakers is going to bankrupt you, sir." and like your insurance company totals the vehicle based on the replacement speaker cost.
I think we should really be scoping out salvage vehicles for just their blown speaker, the accumulative blown speaker issues. But you and I, we watch a lot of movies, and we have sound systems at home, and movies have this 5.1 or 2.1 setup.
You know how many ears do you have, Sammy?
Yeah, I only have two, right?
Me too. And one of them doesn't work.
And I keep thinking, this movie's not made for 5.1. What's the point of this? I have a 5.1 sound system. I want to listen to all this. What audio is built for 19 speakers? 31 speakers, sorry.
Zero audio is built for anything other than 2.0. 95% of commercial music is mixed for stereo. You can buy surround sound mixes from specialty editions of albums if you want. There's some versions out there. There's a lot of classic rock like that people have gone back and remixed, but none of that was recorded, or a very small percentage of that was recorded to be heard in that environment. So what you end up with is a bunch of crossovers and software guessing as to where they should send various frequencies.
And that's what these Bang & Olufsen or those ELS branded technology is supposed to be doing, right?
It's all EQ. It's just all EQ.
Exactly.
Are you into paying for that? Knock yourself out. I don't know what to tell you. A speaker that doesn't fire at your ear is pretty useless. A speaker that's in a door that fires at your knee doesn't sound great. And there's ways you can get around that, like a tweeter that bounces sound off the glass of the windshield, or trying to construct various sound environments based on reflections, based on absorption of different people being in the vehicle, and what you've set up the balance to be, like telling the system if it's just for the sole driver or front or back or whatever.
Yeah.
But you're compensating. A car is a terrible environment. I once talked to a sound engineer, and I was saying, cars are such a terrible environment for sound, right? And he's like, well, he says, the thing is, the car is one of the very, very few environments where a sound engineer knows exactly where the listener will be seated.
Okay.
And he says, but the downside of that is they're seated in like the worst possible place.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of a soundscape,
the
car is the worst.
You're hard left, right? Like you're hard left listening to the music. And everything is an attempt to fix that. So my hat's off to people who toil in this industry, because I think it's largely thankless. But I don't know. I used to be really into audio and car.
Did you used to spend a lot of money on car audio when you're modifying car?
When I was a teenager and when I was dumb, I did that. I'm not saying anyone who does it now is dumb. I know
so many people who used to do that with their.
I'm not saying if car audio is your thing, I'm not saying that it's dumb. If that's your passion, then that's cool. I was dumb about it. I didn't know what I was doing.
You put too much sub and you were bouncing everywhere.
I had like a pickup, so I had one of those tubular subs. And it was okay for certain frequencies, but like I didn't understand creating boxes to push air for speakers at that age. So I would just like hang speakers in weird places that weren't firing at my ears, that were firing at the ground, and that didn't have an enclosure. And like the sound was not great. I didn't understand RMS and et cetera, et cetera. So all of this to say that I feel like you can go down a rabbit hole for anything.
Yes.
And sound is one of those rabbit holes. And like I drew a line many years ago where I'm like, okay, you know what I'm into? I'm into 70s solid state amplification. I like my Marantz amps. I'm going to draw the line there. Luckily, I got in before everyone else figured out they were good, and now they're super expensive. But I don't go for technological advances in sound much, especially now that like my hearing has become an issue for me. It's very hard for me to enjoy music like I used to. So that's kind of where I am with that. And when I see 32 speakers, I'm like, okay, great. That feels like a gimmick,
Yes.
That feels like a 700 horsepower gimmick in some ways. Like it's an impressive number, but the situations where you're going to be able to enjoy that and truly experience it are limited.
Now, I bring this up because I've heard from other people in the past that the old Acura, like Acura's ELS studio, like technology or whatever you want to call it, branded sound system was actually quite good. Same with Mark Levinson's over at Alexis.
Yeah. But a lot of those, they just sold their name.
Yeah, they're just their name, right? Like it's just the same. It's Harman, I believe, that owns this.
They're not necessarily involved in the tuning or anything anymore.
Yeah. So I'm not sure that the new Bang & Olufsen setup is like particularly better or worse. I just wanted to point it out because they've made that change here.
How much do you have to pay for that system?
Well, I mean, it comes on the top trim Type S model, which is nearly $77,000, which is a lot of money for this car. That's US, by the way.
That is quite a bit.
And I didn't have the Type S, which has a little bit more horsepower, about 40 more horsepower.
Is it the same V6?
No, it's a 3-liter V6.
Okay, so it changes. You're telling me the 3.5-liter V6 has 290 horsepower? And the 3-liter V6 has 330?
We've talked about this in the past.
I don't remember us discussing it.
You drove the Type S in particular.
Okay.
It has 355 horsepower. Sorry, so 60 more.
From a naturally aspirated 3-liter V6.
No, a turbocharged 3-liter.
Okay, you didn't mention that. Now I understand.
The other model that I have is just a naturally aspirated 3.5.
It's so strange that you would have such a modest increase in performance. I'm sure I talked about that during the episode.
We talked about it so much, but at the same time, the 355 is not enough when other models have.
It's absolutely
400.
not enough. That's what I'm saying. Like,
right.
Not only is it not enough in the real world where this is a heavy SUV, but it's not enough to impress you to buy it over something else.
Again, I want to point out that there was a time when Acura, and not a long time ago, but there was a time when Acura had really competitive vehicles in all facets, not just design or interior or technology, but in terms of powertrains as well. I was a firm believer in the old sport hybrid version of the MDX.
Yeah, that was a good vehicle.
It wasn't meant to be super efficient, but it was a really good hybrid like a hybrid electric application of the powertrain. And combined with the rest of the vehicle, it made it feel ahead of its time. Right now, the MDX does not feel ahead of its time, and I think that's my major, like falling point with it right now. Earlier this year, I drove the Lincoln Aviator, and I would probably take the Aviator over this MDX. It does a lot of similar things. It had more power though, and the interior felt more special, which is one of the main reasons you're buying one of these luxury cars, right? You want something to feel something unique. Yeah.
What's the price comparison between Aviator and the MDX?
There is a price difference of about $8,000 at the entry level, and I drove a fairly well-equipped Aviator, which was probably $10,000 more than that. And again, the MDX that I drove, which is the A-Spec with the advanced package, is $70,000.
That's certainly a lot of words. A-Spec advanced package.
Yeah, it's still a pricey vehicle. If you're spending $70,000 for a non-turbocharged version of it, please just spend the extra $7,000 and get the turbocharged version of it.
And then don't tell anyone how much horsepower it makes. Don't tell your neighbor driving the X5 how much horsepower it makes.
Absolutely. I mean, X5s come with what? 250 horsepower, 230 horsepower,
and then 380, I think, for the straight six.
Yeah,
the turbo 6, something like that, 382.
So I will say overall, though, quality in the car is quite good. Space is very nice. Technology is good. I even have massage seats in the vehicle, which was something I wasn't expecting in an Acura. I don't think they've had that. They don't have that very commonly. And that's it. This feels like I think the only other automaker that's kind of like phoning it in with their luxury cars is Infiniti. And they just haven't had like competitive product in what feels like 3 years or 4 years right now.
Yeah. And
have they had a new car recently? I don't know.
No,
I don't
there's
think
a
so.
new QX80. That's pretty much it.
Oh, right. So the most expensive version of their car.
And they've been thinning the herd. Like you go in the showroom and there's very few options left.
Yes. On the other hand, I will say that I think the MDX and the Integra are the two best products in the Acura showroom. And that's all I'm going to say. I think they emphasize a sort of, quality. They emphasize like there's a bit of just hitting the important points.
The other thing,
which is not what a luxury car needs to do, is to go beyond the important points.
Yeah, especially when you consider that the Integra is good because the Civic is good.
Yes, exactly.
There's a lot of that sharing. I'm not saying they're the same vehicle, and I do like the Integra, but the starting point for the Integra is an excellent starting point.
That's right. I will say that on the other hand, the MDX, if its starting point is closer to the Pilot, I really appreciate what they've done with the MDX. Maybe that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
But overall, it's not enough for me to sway away from an Aviator, a Lexus TX, or a Volvo XC90.
Wow,
I think
not even the TX. Wow.
No, the TX. I think the TX is like the TX. What I like about the TX is it's made for families. Like it's just built to be a minivan that isn't a minivan, and I think that's an admirable trait for a luxury car.
I mean, everywhere but interior space, right? Like
the TX. You think the TX is too short? Is too small
compared to a minivan?
Yes, sorry, compared to a minivan.
60% inside.
Yes, but what I'm trying to say is, of all of these 3-row vehicles, that's one of the only ones that I would pick where I'd be like, I can put my family in this. On the other hand, if you just had an Escalade or a Navigator, you'd be like, yeah, I'm fine here. But TX was one of those ones that felt like the priority was the cabin, and it nailed that. Cabin space, and it nailed that.
Anything else that you want to say about MDX before we wrap up?
Please, no, I don't want to talk anymore about the MDX.
Okay. What are you going to be, if anyone out there wants to talk more about the MDX,
yes,
how could they do that?
They can head on over to our website, unnamedautomotivepodcast.com, where you'll find a contact form there. You'll fill that out and it lands in our inbox. And we love chatting with our listeners. We really appreciate the engagement that we get from you guys.
Yeah, we had some great emails this past week. Shout out to everyone who took the time to reach out to us. Really appreciate it. Shout out to John specifically and Dean who both reached out, and love to hear from you guys.
We really appreciate it when you guys give us questions too, because then we can, bring them up and pad out our episode length. I mean, answer them.
Yeah, because everyone's asking for longer episodes. I don't know if you noticed that's the number one complaint we get. Why isn't it longer, guys? No. In
addition to our contact form on our website, you can email us through Benjamin's email address. It's benjamin@benjaminhunting.com. Or you can find us on social media. We prefer Instagram, I think, over others. I'm at Sami_ha, like you're laughing, while Ben is at Hunting Benjamin. He's also on Blue Sky with the same profile name.
What are you going to be talking about next week, Sami?
Next week, I've got my hands on a minivan. I've got the Honda Odyssey, and I can't wait to test that out.
I'm going to be talking about the Cadillac CT5, specifically the 2-liter turbo version, which I believe is the most affordable one. So it's an interesting vehicle.
Very cool. I can't wait to hear your thoughts on that, because I've driven that a long time ago, and I thought that was that had a little bit of something going for it.
All right. Well, thank you for listening, everybody.
See ya.